Sarah went missing on Wednesday, and her family are really worried about her. Do you know where Sarah is?
No.
It's really eerie, it's really isolated. It's just, it literally feels like we're in the middle of nowhere. I can't imagine how terrifying it must have been for Sarah Everard to be in the back of a car and being brought somewhere like this at night.
Do you know anything about what happened to her?
I know that she went missing up in London somewhere, just from what I've got on the news.
Have you ever personally met her?
No, not personally, no.
Have you had any interactions with her at all?
What are personal interactions with her?
I can't go into a lot of the evidence. This interview is just about trying to find her.
I'm sat in handcuffs, so you must have something.
A serving Metropolitan Police officer has been arrested in Kent on suspicion of murder.
Wayne Couzens went on to kill Sarah Everard.
Wayne Couzens falsely arrested Sarah after accusing her of breaching lockdown rules. He then drove 80 miles to Woodland near Ashford.
It's really important that we challenge ourselves not to allow the actions of one bad apple to tarnish our police force.
A police officer abused me for 9 years.
My perpetrator was a sergeant.
4 years ago, I was raped by a colleague.
He would say to me, "I am the power," and he would show me his gun.
As someone that's the same age to Sarah Everard, I think I was actually the same age as her when she was murdered. It's just horrifying for me, for all of my friends. It literally could have happened to any of us. A lot of my work over the past 5-6 years has been focused on sexual violence, particularly the abuse of power in big organisations. When you're a breaking news reporter, the pace is so fast, you're reporting on things all the time. But I was looking through old reporting that I'd done. I was actually quite shocked at how many of them related to abuse of power within the police. Couzens sort of lifted the lid on this behaviour that's been happening for a very long time. Couzens was one of the most serious, but he's certainly not the first officer to commit very serious sexual violence against women. That really is the key that drew me to it as a journalist, was just that there is something much deeper that's going on here. There is something fundamentally wrong with policing. It's just the tip of the iceberg, what we know already. There's so much more that we need to get to the bottom of.
My name's Warwick Lewis, and I went to school with Wayne Couzens in 1984. Late one night, I went onto YouTube, and I saw that a poor girl had lost her life, and police had arrested a police officer, PC Wayne Couzens. The biggest thing that I noticed, I wasn't shocked. So this is the entrance to what was Castlemount School. Yeah, it's housing estate now, I believe. I lived about a mile from Wayne. We'd finish school and we'd go round his house. We'd watch the latest movies out. And it was always the action movies. He'd put it on, he'd fast forward to a fight scene, and then he'd be, oh, the next bit's all boring, it's all talking, and he'd fast forward to the next fight bit. and all I just see is a whole bunch of fight scenes. And you could watch a movie with Wayne in 10 minutes. We used to go off in camouflage gear around the hills and cliffs. And going out on these adventures, he would role play that we were on some mission for something or another. He lived very much in a bit of a fantasy world with it all. This was all woodland, all up through here. A bunch of us went round to Wayne's after school one day, and he disappeared off upstairs and came back down, and he had like an old Western cowboy-type revolver. And then one of our friends was standing with his back to Wayne, and Wayne took this gun, cocked it, and shot him through his jeans or school trousers in the testicles from behind. My mate dropped on the floor, sort of holding himself and crying. There was no remorse, no conscience about it. Not like, oh, didn't think it was going to hurt him that much. Are you all right, mate? There was none of that. Nothing at all. He just thought it was funny and laughed. He got off on hurting people. My friendship with Wayne came to an end when he started hanging around with another lad who had bullied me quite a bit. Wayne turned around one day and said, come round to mine after school. So I went round to Wayne's, and this lad was there. And I walked in, and Wayne shut the door behind me. It had been arranged by the two of them. And Wayne knew that I was going to get beaten up badly. Badly. Can I just get a minute? Yeah. Just a lot of memories. Just that whole thing of just thinking maybe if I'd just turn around and give him the hiding, would that have stopped him from being that way and letting that power craze thing develop?
So I'm just piecing together what we know about Wayne Couzens to see if there were any red flags that the police might have missed. All the reports and investigations over the years, the advice is always that there needs to be better checks, better vetting. So in 1989, he was working for his family's garage, and it's been reported by one of his former colleagues there that he was into violent pornography. In 2002, he was with the Territorial Army, and it was during his time there that he was involved in an incident of a sexual nature, which wasn't picked up on when he moved to Kent Police.
I despise the phrase whistleblower. When you start exposing things that are unlawful and you are depicted as if you're doing something wrong, that actually annoys me.
The danger of recruiting the wrong people into policing is that you can recruit bullies, you can recruit people who have got terrible backgrounds in relation to domestic violence, misogyny, or even have criminal records themselves.
I think the vast majority of people who go into the police service are doing it for the right reasons. It's about protecting people, keeping people safe. The danger is where you have people who want to join just for all the wrong reasons. They have a huge amount of power, and they can use that power to exploit people. When I had my vetting done, it was very intrusive, you know, sort of visiting the house, speaking to neighbours, speaking to friends. All of that is gone because of the cutbacks, you know, so a lot of it is done online. People take things on face value. People like Wayne Couzens should never have got through the vetting process. So I think if you started asking him some questions, you would very, very clearly see what kind of attitudes you had.
Coming up on your right is the police station that I was based in. I was a special constable in Kent with Wayne Couzens in 2007. We're equipped with all the usual equipment you would expect of a police officer: the pepper spray, the handcuffs, the baton, the warrant card. Wayne Couzens came across to me as being overly deferent to authority. I remember that his boots were just immaculately polished. You could actually, I could do a shave myself in the reflection of these boots that he had on. In retrospect, that would appear to be a veneer that was covering something more sinister underneath.
Why do generally people join?
Well, people are strange animals because some of us are pretty much on a level and we join it for genuine reasons. Others, I think there's something behind their reasoning for joining. For instance, somebody might join because they feel powerless, and becoming a police officer and parading up and down a street in a town where they live gives them a sense of authority and power. I remember we went to a weapons demonstration and he showed a great interest in the firearms aspect. I've never held a gun, I never want to hold a gun, so it's not something that appeals to me. I mean, I see firearms officers at airports and it's quite intimidating. I don't think I'd want to be intimidating people.
So it looks like that's the site that he worked on.
The SEAL Nuclear Force looks after nuclear sites. The interview process isn't particularly vigorous. You're a glorified security guard. You have the firearms training, which is different because only a small number of officers have firearms training. But once you're in there, you can then access entry into other forces.
It's a very desolate place. He spent 7 years guarding a nuclear power plant. It must be a very, probably quite a lonely job. But it's where he gained the nickname the Rapist. We have tried to speak to people that work with Wayne here at this site, but unfortunately no one been willing to speak to us. Something must have happened that gave him that reputation.
You have banter within the police. Police officers have quite a sick sense of humour. You see such horrible, traumatic things on a daily basis that you have to learn to have this sense of humour in order to cope with what you see. But you know, if you're calling someone a rapist, that something isn't right, because somebody doesn't get a nickname the Rapist for no reason. My name is Laura, and I'm a serving police officer. And 4 years ago, I was raped by a colleague. Went on a night out with friends from work and ended up back at mine. A lot of drink had been involved. Darren started kissing me, getting on top of me. I was kissing him back. We were very, very, very drunk. And then when he started to go further, I tried to take my clothes off, told him no. He just pinned my arms down. I got the impression that he wanted what he wanted and he was going to get that, regardless of what my thoughts were on it. I remember looking at the ceiling feeling disgusted. I felt disgusting. After the incident, I told him that what he'd done was wrong and how upset I was about it. He said that he knew I'd said no, but thought I was messing around. From reporting it to trial was 2.5 years, roughly. He was restricted, but he still had a role within the police. The force that were investigating it said that it's very hard to prove rape when it's two people that know each other. But they said there's more evidence than usual. I had text messages from him acknowledging I'd said no. There was a lot of evidence. Everybody said to me, surely he's not going to get away with this. He won't have a job, he'll get sacked. There's no way the police can keep him. But he did get away with it. The officer in charge of the case phoned me up and said it's not good news. He's been found not guilty. Obviously, I was heartbroken and upset. Darren is still a police officer. It still worries me to this day because I think he could potentially do something again.
In 2015, Wayne Couzens was a suspect for indecent exposure. He should have been investigated, he should have had his warrant card taken off him, and he should have been suspended. That should have debarred him from joining other forces.
I'm a former chief superintendent from the London Metropolitan Police, and I left about 3 years ago. Just before I left, I was working in recruitment. The unit that Wayne Couzens was recruited into was seen as an elite unit, and many young police officers will aspire to be there. Around the time that Wayne Couzens was recruited, the police service in London needed officers who already had firearms experience. So they were desperate to get police officers from other forces to transfer in. They weren't looking at their history, they weren't looking at the complaints that had been made against them. With Wayne Couzens, it came to light that there was an indecent exposure in 2015. That should have been picked up by his employers at the time. And he should never have been given the opportunity to transfer into the Met.
What Wayne Couzens did is almost unique in my lifetime, deeply shocking. However, there's been a history of reprehensible behaviour by police officers, and it's only taken, I think, the Couzens case for everyone to, frankly, appreciate the scale of the problem. We looked at 700 plus vetting files, and we concluded hundreds of people have joined the police that we think shouldn't. People with allegations made against them being allowed to transfer forces too easily. It's impossible to become a bouncer without having your previous employment records checked for the last 4 years before joining. It is possible to become a police officer without that happening. That just doesn't seem right to us.
Other top stories for you today, and the former Met police officer from Kent in prison for murdering Sarah Everard has been sentenced to 19 months for 3 indecent exposures. Wayne Couzens exposed himself twice at a fast food drive-thru in Kent and also to a female cyclist when he was supposed to be on duty.
There have been allegations of Wayne Couzens exposing himself to women. If these repeated cases of flashing had been picked up on, he may never have become a Met police officer. This is the fast food chain Wayne Couzens came to a few days before Sarah was murdered. I'm just going to try and speak to some of the staff that might have remembered it or witnessed what happened. Hi, yes, I'm working on a documentary. I'm sure you're aware about the incident that happened here. I'm just looking to speak to anyone. I'm watching the CCTV footage that the McDonald's gave the police. This is Wayne Couzens' car here. He actually went twice on 2 separate occasions. On the first occasion, he exposed his penis over the top of his trousers, and on the second occasion, he was bolder and was actually naked from the waist down.
I was at work just doing my normal tasks as part of my role at McDonald's. I remember everything, even down to the cheeseburger and coffee that he ordered. I did not expect to have an erect penis shown to me. It took me a moment to process what had just happened, and then became really upset and burst into tears.
Second occasion, the staff gave the police his credit card information and his car registration. Despite that, he wasn't put under investigation and his warrant card wasn't taken off him.
There were no fewer than 6 offences of flashing. Wayne Couzens could have been stopped, and he should have been stopped. Over 30 years, I've been engaged in the criminal justice system. If we're still in a position where the police don't appreciate the threat from people who commit indecent exposure, then we're in the last century. It is absolutely clear it is a very, very threatening piece of behaviour which speaks of a wish to be closer and to do real harm.
Would you be surprised if there's anything more to the story?
I wouldn't be surprised if Wayne Couzens had committed other offences, because what we have the ultimate offence here of where he's kidnapped, raped and murdered a stranger, and we know that he committed indecent exposure. So it would be perfectly reasonable to think that there are other offences that he hasn't been brought to justice for.
I had no one contact me or ask me for a statement. If he'd been held accountable when we'd reported the crime, we could have saved Sarah.
It does feel very secluded and isolated, very bleak. I mean, it's clearly a fly tipping area. I mean, there are refrigerators and old kitchen appliances and kids' toys that have been abandoned. Wayne Couzens bought a plot of land in Hodes Woods in Kent in 2019. Why did he spend all that money, I think it was £5,000 in cash, to buy this area? I mean, it doesn't look like it's somewhere that you would buy to develop and build something on. I can't think what you'd want to use it for. Obviously, the question is, had he planned to murder her? Certainly being here and seeing this, it does make you think, had he got this bit of land for that reason? Yeah, I mean, it's really horrible to think of what went on here.
Other news, and detectives looking for a woman who disappeared in South London on Wednesday night say they remain open-minded as to what happened to her.
Sarah went missing after leaving a friend's house in Clapham Junction at around 9 p.m. She's believed to have walked through Clapham Common towards her home.
Every piece of information is important to us.
I appeal for people to come forward with more CCTV, particularly anyone with a dash cam.
I spent 7 years of my career investigating murders. In my experience, when someone has gone missing, you've either got a missing person or you've got a murder. You've got a very, very short window, if that person's still alive, to find them, so speed is of the essence. The police went through 1,800 hours of CCTV to build up a picture of the evening. Couzens parks his car in Dover on North Military Hill and makes his way to pick up a hire car.
Hello, yes, it is. And you could be enjoying up? Yes, I am.
We know that the reason why he hired the car is to distance himself from his own car. In London, in Brixton, Sarah Everard is leaving home to go to a friend's house after working from home. 4 minutes later, Wayne goes to a garage and buys 30 litres of petrol. That is highly significant. That is enough for a lot of travelling. That is going to facilitate his stalking to find a female victim. Couzens travels to London and he goes to a supermarket in southwest London and buys 14 hairbands that should be used for tying up hair, but the theory is that he was going to use those bands to maintain an erection. ANPR cameras record hundreds of registration numbers per minute, and it catches him driving around the Earl's Court area for 50 minutes. This, to my way of thinking, is extremely consistent with him hunting. Sarah leaves the friend's house, calls her boyfriend for 14 minutes. 28 minutes past 9, Sarah is seen walking along Cavendish Road. And for the first time, Couzens comes into proximity and obviously he's taken notice of her. A few minutes later, we have a bus that captures Sarah and Wayne, a critical bit of evidence there. It's subsequently unravelled that Couzens had previously been on COVID patrols, so he knew exactly what to say to her. And most people, when they're shown a Metropolitan Police warrant card, are not going to question that.
We can see from the CCTV him taking out what we assume is a warrant card. It's your identification. It's a very, very powerful piece of documentation.
When a police officer tells you to stand still, you stand still. When a police officer tells you to get into a car and shows you a warrant card, most of us would trust that officer and would get in the car. Without the warrant card, he would not have been able to do what he did.
Wayne travels from London to Dover, and we can see here all these hits on the ANPR. Back in North Military Road at 11:30, Wayne's hire car arrives where his own Seat vehicle has been kept, and Sarah is transferred into the Seat car. He drives away, and 12 minutes later, is picked up on CCTV. Between midnight and 1:45, Wayne's cell phone was picked up in a rural area northwest of Dover. This is where it's strongly believed that Wayne Couzens raped and brutally murdered Sarah Everard.
Sarah died in horrendous circumstances. She spent her last hours on this earth with the very worst of humanity. I'm tormented at the thought of what she endured. In the evenings at the time she was abducted, I let out a silent scream. Don't get in the car, Sarah. Don't believe him. Run.
Just a few hours after he has murdered Sarah Everard, Wayne buys a hot chocolate with coconut milk and a Bakewell tart. This is strange behaviour because if you've just murdered someone, most people would have some form of remorse and actually feel physically sick. That would make me think, has he done anything of a similar nature in the past?
Well, I'm a homicide specialist, so I work with the police. I've spoken to a lot of serious violent offenders and killers, and the first thing that you have to recognise is 90% of what he did we didn't know, because he never got caught. It would be highly unusual for somebody to go from exposing themselves to abduction, rape and murder. Highly unusual. There will have been steps in that where he was moving towards what he did that night.
About an hour later, he travels to Sandwich to dispose of Sarah's mobile phone, and he removes the SIM card from the main body. He well knows that it's going to make it harder for the police to carry out investigations and detection. On the 5th of March in the afternoon, he has already disposed of Sarah Everard's body. Yet brazenly, he calls the vet and explains to the vet that he wants an appointment for his dog.
Yeah, I was wondering if I could book my dog in for the vet, please. We think she's suffering from, like, separation anxiety. When we come home, she's, like, so excited and she jumps up and she's got longer claws. She, like, scratches the kid, she scratches us.
Now, this is interesting. You can see from this picture, there's some scratch marks on the top left. Couzens is a serving Metropolitan Police officer, and he well knows that if he's arrested on suspicion of rape or murder, the police will be looking for signs of a struggle. He's creating evidence to back up his story if he's arrested.
It is easier for police officers to get away with crimes. They know the system, they know it inside out. They know how evidence works. They know what narratives work on juries, and they can use that to their advantage.
My name is Holly, and I'm a survivor of mental abuse, physical abuse, financial abuse, and sexual abuse, including rape. My perpetrator was a supervising officer, so he was a sergeant. He liked the power. That's what his drive is. He likes power over anything and everyone. He completely manipulated his knowledge as a police officer, and he made me make 3 historical allegations of sexual assault, which I didn't want to make. He also made me go into my doctors and tell them I had mental health problems. And then it wasn't until a lot later that I realised why. When I wanted to report him, he used to say, well, no one will ever believe you anyway, because you're just a serial alleger, and you're mental. I felt like at points he was going to kill me. His eyes go black, and it's terrifying. One particularly violent and horrible night. The neighbours called the police, and I remember they split us into separate rooms, but not far enough that I couldn't hear him, because I could hear every word he was saying. And I remember hearing him tell the officer, on the police systems, you'll see 3 allegations of sexual assault. That's when I knew that he'd abused his knowledge of being a police officer to make me completely unbelievable as a person. When I did report him, I was 100% tipped off about everything. He immediately would have got rid of his laptops and his phones, and he put on counter allegations as a way of setting his footing for his defence. I wrote a 32-page complaint to the investigating force, and at the conclusion they accepted that the suspect was treated differently because he was a police officer. The Crown prosecution dropped the case.
Right. My name's... Can I pick this up? Yeah. Is that all right? Yeah?
Literally 35 minutes after he's done a factory resetting of his phone, the murder detectives arrive and they question him about the whereabouts of Sarah.
It's 35 minutes after he resets his phone.
Yeah. That's worrying. Has someone tipped him off? That's what I'm thinking.
Sarah went missing on Wednesday, and her family are really worried about her now. The inquiry that's been conducted so far has led us to come and speak to you about it. Do you know where Sarah is?
No.
Right. Okay. Do you know anything about what happened to her?
I know that she went missing up in London somewhere, about a week ago or so, just from what I've got on the news.
Okay. Have you ever personally met her?
No, not personally, no.
Have you had any interactions with her at all?
Why would I have personal interactions with her?
I can't go into a lot of the evidence because this interview is just about trying to find her.
Sure.
She's been missing for a while now.
I'm sat in handcuffs, so you must have something.
Well, as I said, you've been arrested on suspicion of kidnap.
Okay, well, I am in financial, and I've been lent on by, I don't know who they are. They're a group, a gang, and they told me, right, I need to go and pick up girls and give them to them.
Tell me about them. I need to find them. Tell me everything you know.
Don't forget, this is the last time that he's ever sat in his front row.
I'm doing what I can to protect my family.
He's trying to minimise his culpability by coming up with this story where he's the victim.
They threatened to take my family away from me. So, at that point, I had no option to try and find somebody. The commonalities that I've found around the serious offenders that I have spoken to is that they are surprised that they ever got charged. Where's the solidarity gone? I was given to believe that I would never get caught. And they all see themselves as the real victim.
I can now confirm that it is the body of Sarah Everard.
A serving police officer remains in custody in connection with this case.
Wayne Couzens really brought to light the shortcomings in policing when it comes to protecting women.
Our inquiries suggest that this officer was not on duty at the time of Sarah's disappearance.
I don't think the Met fully understood the impact that the Wayne Couzens abduction, rape and murder had.
Police officers do not view Wayne Couzens as a police officer. They view him as a murderer who happened to be a police officer.
The Met trying to distance themselves from Wayne Couzens, but the public weren't buying that.
And by refusing to acknowledge the problem, you're never going to find the solution.
It's really important, I think, that we challenge ourselves not to allow the actions of one bad apple to tarnish our police force.
I do want to stress the vast majority of my police officers are good people.
It did not help that Cressida Dick told everyone that it was one bad apple. You don't have to ask yourself too many questions if you just pull him out and lock him up.
A vigil isn't really about a message. It's an opportunity for people to express and channel their grief and their pain. Women across the country needed to come together, needed to express their sorrow. But what actually happened was we got a really clear demonstration of what's wrong with the police. I think until that point, women were in a state of acceptance. And actually, millions of women in this country were jolted out of that. Wayne Couzens is a monster. But what's even more monstrous is the system that enabled him, the system that ignored him, the system that almost encouraged and incubated his worst tendencies. We got a really clear demonstration of what's wrong with the power dynamics between women and the police. The depth and breadth of rot within that institution runs deep. And it runs dangerously deep, fatally deep in the case of Sarah Everard.
When the news about Sarah Everard came out and explained that a police officer has been arrested in association with a woman's death, I found that quite triggering. She wasn't his spouse. She was a stranger. And unfortunately, a lot of the cases, they do it to people they're closest to. Had that been a spouse, you would have never have seen that in the news. My name is Cora, and I was married to a police officer who abused me for 9 years. I tried to leave, but he would never let me do that. When you're a survivor of police-perpetrated abuse, you can't exactly go to the police. That's the problem. I think the Sarah Everard case was so extreme that it got people thinking, how could a police officer be capable of doing that when they are trained to serve and protect the public? Is he the only one?
The tendency to hide behind the bad apple argument, in my view, it kind of obscures the fact that there are more deep-seated problems. Last year, Priti Patel commissioned us to inspect across policing. Every force we looked at had a culture of misogyny. There are people that behave in ways towards their female colleagues that they just don't see as, as wrong. The thousands of women that responded to our survey, everybody had an experience which they just shouldn't have had. More than 100 women in our survey had been the victim of a sexual assault by one of their colleagues in the last year, and more than 1,000 out of 5,000 women that answered had been a victim of a sexual assault at some stage during their career. That's just incredible. Someone described to us how their male colleagues would pick attractive women driving cars to stop and question just on the basis of how good-looking they were. It's just an obscene abuse of power.
The evidence seems to be that there is a culture of misogyny in the police. People don't act on their own. They're in squads, groups, and they're being observed by others who either take action or are party to the crime, I'm afraid.
Two Metropolitan Police officers have been sentenced to 3 months in prison after sharing racist, homophobic and misogynistic messages.
After Wayne Couzens' phone was taken, it became very clear that there was a group on the WhatsApp who were regularly sharing misogynistic, racist, homophobic comments.
If everyone is making jokes about raping women, it means that they're all complicit, so none of them can complain about each other. If Wayne Couzens includes them in his inappropriate behaviour, they're never going to complain about him Because if they do, they themselves will be part of that investigation.
When I saw the content of the WhatsApp group that Wayne Couzens was on, I wasn't in the least bit surprised. They were pretty much a mirror image of the WhatsApp group that I was in. Because of the way that the culture is, you either participate in it or you stand back in silent acquiescence. If you start to challenge it, you are going to become a victim of it. Being a police officer is something that defines you. There's an arrogance to being a police officer. You work long hours. You deal with some traumatic things, you deal with some funny things. There's a lot of gallows humour. And you don't let anyone into the party. We're police officers, you'll not go away.
I've lost count of the number of dead bodies I've seen. So there is a humour which some people would find difficult, but you know, sometimes that humour even crosses the line within that world.
There it is. It's got the date on it as well. 3 days after Wayne Couzens was arrested, this meme appeared, which is exceptionally offensive. That was shared on the group that I was in. Remember the old highway code with the police officer giving it the old stop signs or whatever? It was that. It was stop lone female in car, direct her into woods, rape her, chop her up. Fucking ha. I mean, that's in a group of police officers. A friend of mine who's quite high rank said to me, you know, we've basically told everyone, just get rid of your WhatsApp groups. You know, wipe your phones, reboot them up, get rid of your groups. We don't want to know, we don't want to look. And I'm sure thousands of WhatsApp groups have been shut down.
I think it's easier and more comforting for people to imagine that there are a few evil bastards out there. The harder and more ambitious and more important project is understanding that perpetrators aren't born. They're made. The police were desperate to try and shut down that narrative. They were really hoping it would go away. But it was a huge national story, national scandal. And I knew that Wayne Couzens was, in a way, the tip of the iceberg.
When I heard about Wayne Couzens, I sent a message to a friend. I said, I need to go to the police about Dave Carrick to stop him doing it from anyone else.
What is it you're searching for?
Articles relating to the offences in 2020. This is the allegation that's been made to us, okay, sir?
There's no necessity.
Yes, there is.
So I've only been a police officer for 20 years.
Right. David.
Do you want me to come naked like this?
No, just understand you're under arrest, okay?
I'm under
just
arrest.
Explain to us, what do you need?
I'll pull it like this. Don't worry about it.
Can one of my colleagues go and get you stuff?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to? Yeah?
Which one's yours?
Okay.
My name is Emma. I was in a relationship with David Carrick. Trust was there from the start. Showed me his warrant card, which obviously put ease to me. He was very charming. I just thought I've met the man of my dreams. So you can see he was quite he worked out. He was often positioned in Downing Street. I remember he wanted to take me to show me off to other Metropolitan Police. And I remember when we went there and they were like, "Oh, you're punching above your weight, Dave. What are you doing with him? He's bastard Dave. What do you see in him?" And they were laughing and joking. I didn't know what that meant until about 3 weeks into the relationship. He said to me, "But there is one thing that I do ask from you." And he said that you must obey me. And then his persona changed. He became very, very forceful, very quickly. He would say, "You're my whore, and I'll do whatever I want to you." And he would try to strangle me to the extent where I couldn't breathe. He told me he was the law, and I had to obey him. He was untouchable. He always raped me anally to the extent where I was bleeding. David said, "I'm going to show you another one of your punishments." And he took me downstairs naked. And he put me in a little cupboard under the stairs. I remember I said to him, I'm going to ring the police. He handed me the phone laughing, saying, "Go on, ring the police." He said, "I am the law." Who would they believe?
People have been working side by side with a man who was locking naked woman up in a cupboard, raping her at will. Is there the remotest possibility that he showed none of this in his day-to-day attitude? Obviously, none whatsoever. And the nickname that they gave him of the bastard suggests that he was bad to people, and they knew it.
Dave Carrick and Wayne Couzens were in the same unit, and there's no doubt in my mind it was a small unit. They'd all know each other, without a doubt. I felt that I had met Wayne Couzens. I remember Dave saying they often, in their lunch break, will go and fuck prostitutes. He told me about one Metropolitan Police who was in a relationship that he would boastedly say that he would get home and beat her.
The bad apple narrative is dead now, isn't it? As more and more has come out about the people around Couzens and Carrick being deeply misogynistic, it sends out a huge message that it's quite widespread.
Carrick was the serial rapist in a police uniform. His crimes, today described by the Home Secretary as a scar on our police.
So with David Carrick, there seems to be several incidents with him where he was sort of abusive in public and was, you know, there were clearly parts of his behaviour that people knew about that were problematic. We know he has used sex workers. We also know that Wayne Couzens was using sex workers. He's admitted to that, and that they visited this hotel that we're in now. You have to ask how he was behaving towards them, knowing what we know he did to Sarah Everard.
We know that Carrick was making sexual remarks quite openly, as was Wayne Couzens. The question is whether there is a culture that protects these kinds of people.
Couzens and Carrick came from a department that I'd worked on, and a department of which I was fully aware of its long-standing toxicity. Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Group. They guard Parliament. They are the officers that you see on duty outside Downing Street, outside embassies. It's a very macho department, wandering around in body armour with your guns. Well, in terms of Carrick, I'm not at least surprised. I mean, if you know the system, you know how to work around the system, and you know that the system is ultimately going to find some way to protect you, then, yeah, you can get away with these things. The higher the rank, the greater the level of protection.
The reason I would prefer to stay anonymous is that it concerns me that I could suffer some sort of repercussions from speaking out. People are very reluctant to report in the police service for fear of being ostracised and certainly damaging any career prospects. People like Couzens and Carrick, many people will be aware of their reputations and probably some of the things that they've done, but will not feel comfortable or empowered to report it. There are lots of bad apples. There's lots of, corruption, particularly in senior ranks. Inspector in the force that I work for was a perpetrator of domestic abuse against his partner and applied to transfer to another force on promotion. And prior to his application being submitted, approaches were made to the vetting unit to remove any intelligence about his domestic abuse history because it may harm his chances. We're talking about people who've got completely unacceptable reputations that are known widely, and because of their position and their rank, they are protected.
Of David Carrick, a serial police rapist and torturer.
David Carrick, you have admitted at least 71 instances of sexual violence against 12 victims. You were so confident in the protection of your status within the police force that you offended against all sorts of women, including 2 fellow police officers. The minimum term you will have to serve is 30 years.
As a serving police officer, David Carrick has brought shame on the profession and was not fit to wear the uniform.
David Carrick, he looked quite different to the images that we've seen in the press, where he's got a bit more weight on him. He looked quite gaunt, actually. He'd obviously lost a lot of weight. One of the things that came up again and again was how he had used his position as a police officer to either control the women or to stop them from reporting. Just horrendous. The level of the controlling behaviour, the locking in cupboards, urinating on them. Collectively, I think several of the women described having their lives completely ruined. The charges actually relate to 12 women and cover more than 80 sexual offences in total. That makes him, I think, one of the worst sex offenders in modern history. And he was a police officer, yeah. The overwhelming majority of police officers are good people motivated by public service, but in this minority of cases, they're being allowed to not only stay in their jobs for a long time, each time they're treated as these sort of isolated incidents, that they're just rogue officers.
One of the most difficult things to read with Carrick and Couzens are missed opportunities. This has happened before. My name is Mike Cunningham. I am a former senior police officer and served as an inspector of police forces as well. I had long reported about issues within policing which I thought were a risk and were problematic. I said in 2017 that I believed this issue of officers abusing their position to be the most significant corruption issue in British policing, and crucially, not just in the Metropolitan Police.
Well, after more than 5 weeks of evidence, this case still isn't over. So far, Stephen Mitchell has been found guilty on 6 counts of misconduct in public office.
In January 2011, PC Stephen Mitchell from Northumbria Police was sentenced to 2 life sentences. This was a serial rapist who was a police officer raping women on duty, in uniform, in police buildings, in police vehicles. This case should have been a watershed moment for the police service.
How does that feel, knowing what we know now?
It feels like the watershed moment wasn't a watershed moment. My experience of leading organisations has been that the structural changes can be made, systems can be put in place, training can be delivered. The most difficult thing to change is culture. The behaviours that you walk past are the behaviours you accept.
Ten years ago, there was the Stephen Mitchell case. He stood trial for a sexual assault in the military and then lied on his application. It's the same thing again and again. There's the case of Wayne Richardson Scott, who was jailed for 19 years, convicted of 10 rapes, and his behaviour was able to flourish throughout his career. But we've got offenders like Wayne Couzens. He was called the pervert. Ian Nowd was also ex-military. He was already being investigated for sex offences when he began as a student police officer. Kevin Bentley claimed that he was Teflon, suggesting that nothing sticks, so he thought he wouldn't get caught. You know, we can see here there's some incredibly serious allegations. 10 rapes, 7 rapes, 24 sexual and physical assaults, 1 rape and 5 sexual assaults, 25 sex offences. This is only some of the offenders that we've picked out who have a history of sexual violence against women. There are so many more, but I think this is helpful just to show the patterns between some of the worst offenders. It shows that the same mistakes are being made again and again, year on year. You know, there's maybe a report at the time, lessons learned, recommendations made, and then move on to the next story.
The Metropolitan Police says more than 1,600 cases of alleged sexual offences or domestic violence from the last 10 years are being reviewed. More than 1,000 past and present staff are under scrutiny.
It is vital other forces double down on their efforts to root out corrupt officers. This may mean more shocking cases come to light in the short term.
What are your fears if things don't change?
I don't want to live in a country where people like you ask me if we should trust the police. I want to live in a country where that's a given.
And there's an old Dutch saying, trust walks towards you and disappears on horseback.
It's going to take a great deal more than just prosecuting individuals before we have our faith restored in the police.
The only reason that Wayne Couzens is being talked about is because he murdered somebody. But the rapes are still happening.
If nothing changes, it's not it'll happen again, it'll just keep happening.
What's at stake here is trust and confidence in British policing, and that's why this needs to be treated with the utmost seriousness.
I do believe that it's likely that there will be another Wayne Couzens. It may not be this year, it may not be in the Met, but yes, it will happen again.
No justice, no sexist, no justice.
There's been a wider awakening and a growing public consciousness. Younger women in particular have found a voice and are not gonna let this die down.
Enough is enough!
That's what's really shifted, and that's shifted in a powerful way. It really matters.
Enough is enough! Enough is enough! Enough is enough!
I know
have peace inside with Dave Carrick, knowing that he's locked away, that he can't hurt anybody else. The judge served it well, but this should have been stopped a long time ago. There needs to be answers. I need answers. We all need answers.
Time is the biggest healer. I still get anxiety, but I'm a lot better than I was. I've been through essentially 2 trials. I know that I've done everything I can to prevent it from happening again.
Society as a whole doesn't believe women, and that makes me really angry.
Even though I'm safe now, there are thousands of women out there that are still facing this every day. And who do they go to for help?
That's why we've got to keep talking about it, because if we don't talk about it, everyone will just keep burying their head in the sand. There are some incredible people who are so passionate about justice. I do believe that there is so much hope out there that things can get better.